So the film adaptation of Project Hail Mary came out last month, and like many others, I loved it. And it made me think about the book by Andy Weir, which I also loved, and something not many book reviewers talk about. It's the moment when the protagonist wakes up alone. He doesn't know who he is, or where he is, or why there are two corpses strapped beside him. Awkward. And in the span of a few pages, Andy Weir does something remarkable. He makes you trust the guy, despite the corpses, which raises a writing-related question that's maybe more evident in retrospect, but because I haven't heard many people talk about it, is worth exploring. Did Andy Weir earn our trust because he's a great writer, or because he's a great engineer of problems? So instead of dissecting, as most do, the science, twist, or Rocky, actually I do want to talk about Rocky. Let's suss out the prose itself, and not a particular passage as I usually do, but the novel as a whole. Now, the thing I'm always trying to get at in these videos is whether an author's writing can be argued as perfect, knowing that it's an impossible standard. In the case of Project Hail Mary, can I challenge you to judge Andy Weir's writing as, if not perfect, excellent? You can comment if you judge it otherwise. I mean, maybe you think, like a lot of good commercial fiction, that it's merely capable. Well, if you'll stick with me, I want to explore this with you, and maybe by the end of this video, you might see Andy Weir's style very differently. Who is Andy Weir? Really? Andy Weir wasn't supposed to be here. He didn't come from literary circles or climb the traditional publishing ladder. He was a software engineer, a physics obsessive. Picture a guy who likes orbital mechanics the way some people like fantasy football. He originally published his novel The Martian, chapter by chapter, and on his website for free. It was meant for other science geeks who would email him corrections on his math. Definitely not to admire his metaphors. Then readers demanded an ebook version, which he sold for 99 cents. Then everything exploded. Yes, in the book, but also his old life. Next thing, Hollywood calls, and suddenly Andy Weir, the programmer, became one of the most commercially successful contemporary science fiction authors. This is significant to know because when you read Project Hail Mary, you can feel that origin story in every paragraph. This isn't the prose of someone trying to win a Pulitzer. This is the prose of someone trying to ensure the spaceship doesn't explode. Alright, so what am I saying? That a good story trumps literary craft? The illusion of simplicity. If you strip Weir's writing down to its core, it's very straightforward. A lot of, okay, here's the plan, followed immediately by, that plan did not work. Lots of math, lots of jokes, short to medium sentences, direct observations, clear explanations. There's very little ornamentation. If you want brooding reflections about the cosmos as a metaphor for loneliness, you're reading the wrong book. What you will find is a more general idea that space is hard. Now, is this incredibly lazy or incredibly confident? Read it, and you'll quickly see the book never aims to impress you with its language. It's here to calmly walk you through a series of increasingly terrifying engineering problems. Now, please comment below if you think, well, this proves that it is lazy. But I'll ask you this. Did Andy Weir's writing style, its brevity and lack of frills, keep you turning pages? I think that in stripping away the verbal friction that can slow some readers down, Weir deliberately engineered his prose for velocity. To break it down even further, Weir writes in the first person with extreme clarity. Every paragraph moves the problem forward. Every explanation is tied to survival, and there's no wasted motion. It's somewhat algorithmic. Setup, problem, calculation, improvised solution, new problem. As a reader, you kind of get addicted to this. So maybe the real question isn't whether Andy Weir's prose lacks beauty. Maybe we've just been trained to look for the wrong kind. What if this engineered clarity is his poetry? I mean, again, if you disagree, please do so respectfully in the comments. Prose as transparency. I think Weir is actually really good at making his prose invisible. You rarely stop to admire a sentence, but you also rarely stumble over one. I mean, think of it this way. Weir's prose is like clean glass. You don't compliment a window, you just appreciate the view. You see the story, not the writing. And in this case, the view is an astrophage-driven suicide mission with an unexpected interspecies friendship. Astrophage. The term derives from Greek roots, combining astro, star, and phage, to devour. The voice. Why, it's sneakily smart. Ryland Grace, our narrator, is technically a brilliant scientist, but he doesn't sound like one. In fact, he sounds more like a schoolteacher who's a little overwhelmed, which of course he is, and he explains astrophysics the way someone might explain how to assemble IKEA furniture, confident at first, then increasingly nervous halfway through. I mentioned earlier that Weir quickly earns our trust with Ryland, and this is a big part of it. His thinking is procedural, he models rational thinking. He also explains what he knows and admits what he doesn't. That's a great way to quickly build credibility. Not to mention that it makes Ryland, and therefore Weir's writing, easily accessible. Weir writes complex science in a tone that says, relax, I've got this, you're not going to fail the test. Which makes sense considering Weir has said in interviews that he writes science in a way that doesn't make readers feel stupid. And so the science is complex, talks of astrophage, relativistic travel, alien biochemistry, but the voice guiding you through it is friendly. Ryland becomes a friend. So no, I don't think it's a lazy prose, because it takes discipline to make advanced physics feel like a casual conversation, where the criticism lives. Okay, I don't want to avoid the other side of the critical aisle, because there are a lot of critics I've heard or read saying Weir's characters lack emotional depth, that it's more mechanical than literary. And to be fair, they're not wrong for saying so. Weir does seem to prioritize plot over psychology and momentum over mood. Introspection seems to only happen when it's convenient. But are these flaws or choices? The real question is, does the book suffer because of them? The fact is, the book doesn't act like it's trying to be meditative literary fiction. It's about solving extinction. Is it wrong for the prose to reflect that urgency? Or does it thrive because of it? Please share your thoughts. Art is subjective, and maybe you're the sort of reader who would have appreciated those reflective moments. My comments on this are that if you suspend your belief and go along for the ride, if you treat it as real, which is the fun part of stepping through the portal and into a great story, then Project Hail Mary is exactly what it intends to be, a race to solve extinction with science. In my opinion, you don't want a hero who's waxing poetic. Not while the sun is dying. You want someone doing math, preferably correct math. The Rocky factor. Okay, I have to talk about Rocky. When this heartwarming alien engineer enters the story, the book changes. Not dramatically, but enough that you notice it. The prose actually softens, the humor becomes warmer, the dialogue more playful, and the stakes become emotional. And the problem-solving becomes collaborative. For the first time, the book isn't just about survival, but friendship. To be clear, Weir doesn't suddenly become lyrical. He doesn't transform into some cosmic poet. He stays in his lane. He lets repetition and collaboration do the emotional work. Grace and Rocky bond the way engineers bond, by fixing things together, by failing together, by solving increasingly ridiculous problems side by side. And boy, does this make you care. And it's not because the prose told you to care, it's because the structure earned it. I mean, that's Weir's emotional vocabulary, and in my opinion, it works. Is he excellent? I'm keen to read the comments later to see if I've convinced you of this, but if I haven't yet, I'll try one last time to resolve the main question I asked at the start of the video. Is Andy Weir an excellent prose stylist? If your standard is Nabokov, Ishiguro, or Dostoevsky, then there's probably no way I can get you to agree with me. But if excellence to you means absolute clarity, relentless narrative propulsion, complex science that feels effortless, a voice you can trust, emotional payoff built through structure rather than ornament, then for this book, you're likely in my camp and saying, yes, Weir is exceptionally good at what he chooses to do, which is not to dazzle you with prose, but to solve a story problem as elegantly as possible. Yes, you lose some psychological depth, but you gain a narrative immersion. My argument is that this engineering mindset gives his writing its own kind of integrity. And in that sense, Andy Weir isn't just engineering the problems in his story, he is engineering the reader's experience of them. One calculation, one failed plan, and one desperate solution at a time. Admit it, that's effective prose design, right? Then again, effective isn't perfect. Perfective? Perhaps perfection is impossible. The pursuit, however, is where the fun is. Read on!